Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here to attend this conference of the Institute. I'm going to chair this session. Thank you very much for people who are here, and thank you very much for people who are watching us remotely. There is a simultaneous interpretation available for people who want to listen to this session in English. Thank you very much to people from Veolia, people from outside, some authors as well, great members of our critical friends, Armand and Patrick, who are helping us a lot in terms of innovation. This conference goes hand in hand with the release of the last number of the Institute's publication. In fact, it's available in French and in English. It's available at the back of the room, and it will also be available on our website. 20 contributions, and Nicolas is going to tell us all about it because he supervised this publication. We'll try to address the major challenges of innovation driving ecological transformation, a very interesting topic for Veolia, but many other companies as well. And it requires a broader, more diverse, more cooperative ecosystem. Right, I'm going to give the floor to Nicolas, who is the managing director of the Institute. He's going to tell us how this publication was drafted, what is the angle, what is the content. He's going to talk for about 10 minutes, and then I will introduce our speakers, 3 women this time, only women. Are women more innovative? Well, that begs the question. We are very, very happy to have 3 women on stage with us, and we also have 1 man. Nicolas, you have the floor. Can you hear me? Yes, we can. Thank you, Dina. Big responsibility being the only man in this panel. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. This is a conference on a conventional topic, innovation. But we are addressing innovation with a specific angle. Innovation driving ecological transformation. Being innovative or not being innovative or disappearing, it is the golden rule of our world today. We need to innovate. Innovation is a key. Innovation is a culture. Innovation is an ethical obligation, and it is also a key to corporate survival. Innovation has different shapes: disruptive innovation, incremental innovation, green innovation, open innovation, clean innovation, eco-social innovation, etc. Innovation reshapes constantly human activities, and there are a lot of successes. For example, we divided by 3 in 30 years CO2 emissions from planes for kilometer per person. 0 liquid outflows as well. There's also calorie recovery of wastewater. A lot of innovations to recover fatal energy, and also hydroponics agriculture, to name just a few. That being said, innovation, even when it is green, has some blind spots. It is struck by ambivalence. In the past, it used to focus on low-carbon solutions, and it left on the wayside or at the bottom of the list of priorities other major challenges for the planet, for example, biodiversity erosion, or grand artificialization, or natural resources rarefaction or depletion. At the global level, we see that there is a disconnection between CO2 and GDP, but not for raw material. And we don't take into account scale effects. For example, what will be the impact of electric vehicles once there are 1 billion on the roads? These biases, these limitations of innovation mustn't make us give up, because innovation is never mature when it sees the light of day. It needs to evolve, it needs to change, and innovation needs to change today because the world is changing. Innovation can't forget about the secondary effects, those secondary effects which are no longer secondary actually, since general innovation is widespread around the world. This is why it is necessary to have a technological common sense in order to promote not the low tech or the high techs or the frugal techs, but the right techs. What are the technological common sense criteria, and how can you identify an innovation that is fully compatible with the ecological transformation? And I would like to highlight a few items. Number one, innovation which has a positive impact that is not undermined. It does not shift pollution geographically or in time. It is not a partial innovation in its ecological footprint. It's not an innovation that it is an innovation that gives access to everyone. We need to come up with innovations, but they need to be affordable by poorer people. Innovations which sometimes can be quickly rolled out. Given the urgency of climate change, we mustn't think about cost efficiency, but speed efficiency, or speed, cost, and efficiency. Very often, it's a hybrid innovation that combines technological, social, and societal progress. With a constant with the current level of technology, we won't be able to offset greenhouse gases. We won't be able to reduce biodiversity losses. We won't be able to efficiently tackle resource depletion, but with our current organization and current behavior either. Solutions that are only based on efficiency are not enough. We also need to adapt our economy structures. We also need to adapt our behaviors. This is the reason why ecological transformation needs new ideas, new technologies, but also new business models, new behaviors, new organizations. It also needs new leaders, committed leaders, to promote innovation and lead it to fruition. How can we promote innovation that drives the ecological transformation? How can we improve innovation? Well, this is the topic of this new publication or new edition of Facts that is available at the back of the room. You can also download it on the Institute's website. We have a cross-cutting approach. We also look at field studies in emerging countries and in developed countries. It addresses different topics such as effects of scales, if there is a global rollout of innovation, the right to make mistakes as well. If innovation innovates successfully because it is not undermined by the fear of making a mistake, and the innovation death valley as well. A period in which there are fewer subsidies and where investors are challenging the profitability of the project. Other topics are addressed, for example, the need to implement ecosystems that promote innovation, emergence, and distribution. The adoption and distribution cycle of an innovation is 25 years old compared to 5 years old to come up for an innovation. This publication was drafted thanks to a guide, Insight, a consulting company based in London. There are articles, field studies from various people, from l'école les mines Paris, for example. I encourage you to read the very interesting article about the metamorphosis of innovation. Another university, Management Singapore, or the New Delhi Nehru University Applied Research Institutes as well. UNPD, OECD, companies that support startups, Net Zero Cities, it's a city network, or also local authorities such as the Seine-Saint-Denis authorities, grassroots organizations, ones that focuses on recycling and reuse, circular capital, an investor, and companies such as Veolia. And I would like to thank Catherine for being here. Ceiling Transition that specializes in circular economy. We have renowned experts today, and I'm giving the floor to Dina, who is going to moderate this conference. Thank you very much, Nicolas. So we saw that innovation was essential. It is not only about technology. Innovation is social, cultural. There are articles about all of those topics in the publication. And so we've invited 3 people who contribute at different levels to innovation, to the shaping of the world of tomorrow. where innovation changes, grows, etc. Let me introduce our three speakers before asking them questions. First of all, we have Pilar. Let's start with you, Pilar. Researcher and professor in the Management, Innovation and Entrepreneurship Department at École Polytechnique, a school that we know quite well. We like them very much. She obtained her doctorate in management from ESCP Europe, and she's Colombian. We have a panel of international women today. We're going to talk about France, but then if you have any questions about how France compares to other countries, our speakers will be able to talk about that. Her research focuses on the on CSR, sustainable development practices, and how we can integrate that in the curriculum so that students can start thinking differently, start learning new things, can learn differently, and include this essential aspect of ecological transformation. So it can be an option, it can be mandatory. Well, she's going to tell us all about that. On my right, we have Teodora Ene from Romania, French culture. And she's here to represent BPI and funding of innovation for startup tracks. She comes from the risk ecosystem. She was a consultant for financial institutions, banks, and she gained an interest in the startups ecosystem, SMEs, innovative tech companies, but not only. And now at BPI France, she supports these startups and the BPI investment funds, not only in France, but also abroad. So she's going to tell us what is this startups ecosystem, and she's going to tell us if funding has changed. This is another aspect. And who better to talk about innovation at Veolia than Veolia's Director of Innovation, Catherine Ricou. Thank you very much for being here. We've talked a lot about this publication, and well, she has extensive experience, operational experience in environment services, water, waste and energy in France and abroad, and she now leads the innovation department. What is the role of a major group? How can we innovate? Because some people think that, well, being a large group, we can't innovate. We've been innovating for 170 years, yes, but the world is different. Do we need other cultures, other qualities, other processes? Catherine is in charge of dealing with all of that, and she's going to tell us more about that. So thank you very much, ladies, for accepting our invitation. First question. I'm going to ask what role innovation plays in the service of ecological transformation and in your institutions. Why should we innovate? Couldn't we just improve what we already have? And what is innovation in your respective fields? I'm going to start with you because education comes first. So Pilar, why is innovation today at the heart of education, and how do you take that into account working in such a great school as École Polytechnique? Good morning, and thank you very much for your invitation. Thank you very much. Very happy to be here to talk about what we do at École Polytechnique, in how we reshape and transform our pedagogical approach in order to raise a challenge of ecological transformation and various social issues. For a few years now, we've tried to integrate more explicitly and more fully sustainable development within our curriculum. All curriculum. We have specialized masters that focus on ecology. We have masters that focus on climate, energy, and therefore they are focusing on this issue. We also have other curriculums, more conventional curriculums, traditional curriculums, in which sustainable development was not necessarily addressed directly. So there are classes, are researchers are thinking about climate and energy, so it was integrated. But for a few years now, we've had a more holistic approach at the school. We set up a sustainable development department within the school. They work on the campus articulation, and also they work on the various programs, making sure that sustainable development is integrated into all the curriculum. We opened optional classes. So there is, for example, a certificate, sustainable development. So students who are interested can select classes that can have the sustainable development label with different angles. Innovation for sustainable development, for example, that's a class I teach. All classes on sustainable innovation, classes on climate as well. The physics of climate, mechanics, more technical aspects linked to sustainable development or energy. And gradually, we developed this certificate that helps students have this sustainable development approach. Within the same mindset, we have training programs that focus on science and challenges for the environment. We also have an energy training course and other training courses that are less focused on sustainable development, but that can integrate some elective classes about sustainable development. I believe it's very important to highlight the fact that for the past 3 to 4 years, we've organized seminars for all curriculums focusing on sustainable development. We might have the opportunity to talk about that later, but we talk about, we have conference-based training and more innovative approaches talking about sustainable development to help students think about that topic. And as soon as they arrive in school, we can show them show that sustainable development is important. Are those elective classes or mandatory courses? Well, the seminars are mandatory. They are parts of the curriculum, and they are more and more integrated into all the curriculum. And there is a project. It's been keeping us very busy for the past year, more than a year. We are developing an interdisciplinary class for sustainable development, an interdisciplinary course for sustainable development. It goes without saying, it sounds obvious, but practically speaking, it's quite challenging to bring together the various classes within the school or the various subjects available in the school to create a curriculum focusing on sustainable development. So we can have an in-depth analysis, but it is accessible for students who have just joined the school soon. Next September, this sustainable development curriculum, mandatory curriculum, will be available. It's going to combine more conventional subjects, conferences, lectures, etc., and more project-based projects that will enable the students to talk about sustainable development under different angles. Can you give us an example of an experience-based project? Well, there will be a series of lectures on various topics, and then the students will have the opportunity to see different angles with different modules. There will be a module focusing on foresight, for example. They will talk about transports of the future, case studies, or they can work on simulations. But really a test-based approach. So they will be more active in the training program to think about sustainable development. Very interesting. We are going to see the emergence of this mandatory interdisciplinary curriculum. It looks like a great step forward. Challenging. It took a year. Yes, this is it's almost ready now. Thank you very much, Pilar. Now let's turn to the financial side, because ecological transformation will not happen without financing of innovation. So we hear people talking about green finance, etc., and at the same time we hear people saying, "Oh, yes, finance is talking a lot, but is not doing a lot." There's a lot of greenwashing. So part of the BPI's mission is to fund economic development with an environmental and social approach. What can you tell us? How does BPI innovate? And how does BPI contribute to developing this innovative ecosystem through funding? Theodora, thank you very much for inviting me today. I'm very happy to be here in the headquarters of a global leader of the ecological transformation, and you're covering almost all aspects of the ecological and energy transformation. So at BPI France, so a few years ago, we said that we were a climate bank. And so our ambition is to support companies, which is our core business. And we have a lot of responsibilities in that matter. For a few years now, we've been hearing about a lot of concepts such as green finance, green bonds, transition, social and environmental bonds. A lot of products were developed with different realities, depending on the level of ambition, and but either way, there is a underlying trend, and it is going to be increasingly essential. Just to tell you about our approach. There are financial experts who, well, we fund companies that are threatened or that are faced with a physical risk because their headquarters is in a region with water stress or with floods. So this is a risk aspect, a physical aspect. And then we also look at the transition risk.
That is all the companies that would not be ready to meet the new standards, in particular with regard to corporate and social responsibility. And so they are running a financial risk that really has an impact on our balance sheet. So we have to look at opportunities. We see that in Europe there is more and more interest in these environmental factors, and companies that are undertaking this transition or who are looking for innovative solutions for the transition are finding favor with investors. This includes offering specialized products, and we classify companies in 3 categories. Those that we do not wish to finance anymore. So, for example, some investors want to get out of the gas and oil industry. There are enablers, that is, companies that are facilitating the transition, companies that are producing biofuels, for example, in particular SAF for aviation, or air purifiers, or batteries that we're hearing about a lot these days with many different technologies. That's the enablers category. They may have better interest rates for loans. And the third category is called Great Green. That is companies that need to undertake a transition, either with regard to their production or meeting standards, because often these standards having to do with CSR are part of the Scope 3. I think it's something you're well aware of. This is putting a lot of pressure on companies and on their suppliers. So for financing, we look at different levels of risk, macro and micro. And in France, since 2019, we have 40 billion euros dedicated to this transition for enablers and companies that are becoming more green. These funds are split between the local banks and BPI France, and the local banks wants to accompany local areas as well as businesses in the ecological transformation. We have $55 billion over 5 years to dedicate to this work. That's about, and we have already extended about a third of this funding. There's quite a bit that's linked to the ecological transformation and the energy transition. We're looking at low carbon solutions. We're looking at batteries. We're looking at water use. And BPI France is an operator working with the ADAM on the France 2030 agenda. And we have been extending calls for tender to work with startups, with small businesses, but also major groups and research centers. So we're getting out of the old mindset and looking towards a consortium approach with several different forms of stakeholders that could participate together in finding solutions for this transition. It's important to remember that some innovations may be disruptive or incremental, but in any event, 95% of them must participate in complex value chains that already exist. So de facto, we're working with major companies, and one of the roles of these companies is to integrate these solutions and to make them included in the value chains. It's not enough just to have good ideas and to create a startup. It's not that easy. And this is especially true for the ecological and energy transition. So that's a perfect transition for Catherine. So we're talking about major groups like Veolia and the role that we play with regard to startups, for example. Do you mean to say that all companies that come looking for financing have to go through this risk analysis with regard to the environment and the ecological transformation? Because some of the startups that you finance, that's their job directly, but others, that's maybe not their main mission. So do you have a screening anyway to see to what extent they have integrated that aspect in their work? That's a good question. And I think it's something we don't always talk about that publicly. Financial institutions are often rather closed-mouthed. But all of these institutions have risk evaluation tools, including for the environment. I think it's been baby steps for the banking world so far, but now banks do have models for evaluating risks, and so they have a financial evaluation of any company, whether it's a startup or a group, and then we've added to that extra financial criteria concerning the climate, the environment, and that is now part of our evaluation. I think in the short term or in the medium term, there will be banks that will be turning down requests for loans because we will feel that the environmental risk is too high, or that the business concerned hasn't made the best choices with regard to the ecological transformation. So it's very interesting. The European Central Bank made a statement that was very clear in this regard just a few weeks ago. Any business that does not prove that they have integrated these climate risks into their business plans will no longer be financed by the ECB because we will no longer accept this collateral. So that means that the banks will be more and more proactive in this regard, and it will have an impact on the overall rating of a company. At BPI France, it's a bit different because we do sort of a door-to-door business, so to speak, with companies. And we try to accompany each company in its transformation by ensuring that they have inclusive transformation, making sure that no one is left behind. And this is part of our goal of accompanying all of these businesses. So, yes, innovation, including social innovation, that's part of what you're doing. So we're talking about startups with good innovations. In a group like Veolia, is there a welcoming space for these innovative startups? We've been in this business for 170 years and things have been going well, so why do we have to innovate? What's the purpose of innovation? Well, thanks for that question. I think that this is related to what Theodora was saying. We can see that for the ecological transformation, we absolutely must continue to innovate, and faster than ever, because we have a real paradigm shift ahead of us. And that's the role of innovation, is to help us with this ecological transformation. When we have this paradigm shift, we can see that Veolia is something that we're comfortable with at Veolia, because over 170 years we have had to do a lot of adaptation, face up to a different world, adapt our models. And we can't push forward only with the idea of volume of work. We have to have innovative work as well, in particular in energy. You know, you can see that Engie has an ad campaign now that's saying you should use less energy. So clearly, we're pushing for a different model for lower consumption. This is a big change. This is quite new for many stakeholders in the area, this change of model with regard to decarbonized assets. We'll have a different approach than if we're working with someone who has fully carbonized assets and might eventually be blacklisted. So what our role should be is to see how we could help these assets become decarbonized. So we have to understand all the mechanisms. There are very new models. This requires innovation. How can we accompany these groups? And once again, we're looking at enablers, as Theodora said. So all of our innovative solutions have to help our customers to decarbonize. And for this, we need new models, but we have to continue developing them, because business models for assets that have to move to decarbonation are not fully mature yet. Another paradigm shift for regard to this transformation is social acceptance. Of course, we all say that water is a precious resource and we shouldn't waste it or just use it one time. So social acceptance for the second cycle of water, as we call it, is something new. We're looking at inclusion, deep tech, and affordability. That is our capacity for local authorities to finance such an approach of water reuse. This is a key factor. And another subject is the problem of resources. We have models that focus on resources, but some of our innovations may already be outdated. If they use up too much material, if they use up too much water resource, then they are not innovative today. Some businesses have to be profitable within a few years, and if our innovation is too disruptive, this might make them inappropriate. When we look at startups, I think we can go farther than just a startup, because our responsibility and our advantage at Veolia is that we have great capacity. We have capacity to experiment. We have a real-time experience. We are able to work on acceptance for water, energy, waste, decarbonization, resource management. We have experience, and we have been able to experiment as well in these fields. Sometimes there are areas where we have doubts or whether we're worried about the risks. But that means that we have to rely on experiments to see how we can create these new models that will take us into the future and that will help us with long-term models. I'm not surprised that Theodora comes from the world of risk evaluation, because this is an area where we've had to create models so that we can make assessments. We know how to experiment with models, and I think it's true that we're not as agile as startups, but we have a lot of experience in risk. So I think there's a lot of work to do to bring these two worlds together. Thank you. Very interesting. And indeed, this brings us to uncertainty management and our capacity to experiment and to try new things. And as you said, sometimes we had innovations that maybe are outdated now. And you have to be able to, turn around and determine that something that once was innovative no longer is. Emmanuel Ustin wrote an article about that, I think, talking about regenerative leadership of our organizations. So this is also part of a changing mindset, behavior changes, change in practices, better cooperation. And how do your institutions encourage this change in behavior and attitude? And what are the best attitudes and behaviors to adopt? Theodora? Perhaps we could start with you. Yes. I think there are several questions in your question. This is an ongoing debate. Will the solution come from one new way of doing things? Is it a technological solution? Is it a considered solution? How can we ensure that everyone can take on ownership and accept these solutions? So I talked about BPI France's philosophy, which is to accompany all stakeholders and to leave no one aside, include all businesses and sectors. So we have a very global outlook on innovation. We recognize that there are different business models, but maybe a low-tech business model might sometimes be more appropriate. It's very interesting to branch out in this way. There's also the social aspect, which comes into play, and that's very important as well. This is an economic aspect, of course, but I could talk about two BPI France initiatives that go beyond this purely economic point of view. We have BPI France Creation, which seeks to encourage the creation of businesses in local areas, including economically disadvantaged areas. And this is a way of pulling everyone up through the creation of a business, because this creates jobs, it creates wealth, and so forth. And this initiative to support the creation of businesses and to come back to the environment, environment is part of the criteria that we use. We help them with assessments and in order to calculate their needs and resources, energy. We help them to better define the energy consumption of their buildings, the recyclability of the products that they make. So we help them along the way, both in an economic way, but it's also a social approach as well. And so we do have a big investment fund. These are called impact investment funds that always have a social aspect or a social and environmental aspect. So our products help us to intervene on several levels and in a broader way, I think, with regard to this transition. So through social aspects as well. Catherine, what do you think should be encouraged with regard to new behaviors, new skills, in order to improve screening and investment choices? What do you work on, with others certainly, to develop this new culture? What needs to be developed? What needs to be changed? I think the first thing is the question of corporate culture. Indeed, this is something that we work on together. Dinah, I think this change in culture, our mindset, has to do with facing up to the unknown or the uncertain. This is a field that's advancing very quickly when we talk about adapting to climate changes or regulatory changes. But there are also subjects like health and safety. There are a lot of subjects where there's a lot of uncertainty. And in terms of corporate culture, I think innovation is something that enables us to constantly face up to these new hypotheses. We have to understand that when we present a project, we won't immediately have all of the answers. We can't answer everything right away. There will always be something unknown. There will always be things that are unsure. So that means that we have to change our methods. It's a more creative approach. We have to have a method. We have to have a rigorous approach. We have to ask questions and try to find the answers. And I think part of the method in terms of skills and behavior is to be exhaustive as possible in establishing our criteria so that we can come up with data, so that we can understand if an innovative proposal is credible. We have to look at all the risks. And in any event, we have to be very rigorous in our approach. There's a lot of work to be done, I know, because sometimes it's very hard to scratch a project off the list after you've been working on it for a while. But we have to know how to be able to do that as well, because I think we all are in this sort of American syndrome of FOMO, fear of missing out. And the ecological transformation is a field where we have a lot of solutions that are available, but there are also solutions that we have to continue building up together. We have to focus, we have to move quickly, and I think in our corporate culture, we have to accept uncertainty, and then once that's been accepted, we have to accept to focus on subjects and know how we can come back to a subject that has been perhaps set aside for a moment because it wasn't the right moment to go forward with it. This is how innovation teams, human resources teams, have created the Innovation Academy. And the first year was to work with different types of people to see how we could bring about this corporate cultural change. We also have modules for practitioners to work with different methods relating to project management in the area of innovation. And then we have Enough for All, because innovation must be everywhere, and we have a lot of incremental innovation, which is part of an ongoing process, so we're always trying to improve, and this is something that we do every day with our partners. Yes, that's very interesting. I participated in a round table at the VIP last week for new managers, And I think, in fact, there will be a lot of people wanting to participate because this is really, we have to innovate, and that can be stressful. But innovation is not only disruptive, it can also be incremental. It involves a rigorous approach. It involves the skills that we already have, but perhaps skills that were not applied to innovation in the past. And the fact that we constantly must repeat the fact that innovation is everywhere, including in our methodology and risk assessment. And we don't always think of innovation in these fields. Yes, I think a very good example for all teams, often the questions that we ask have to do, for example, if we want to work with an innovative startup that we don't know, how do we set up the partnership? Do we have an MOU, an NDA? Is it binding, non-binding? There's so many questions that come up. And what is the value that this startup is bringing us? And what value am I bringing to the partnership? These are very concrete questions. And we have a lot of examples of methods that we can use so that all the stakeholders or all the partners in a project can be playing their roles fully. And how do you handle this in training? I know you've tried to introduce hard skills and soft skills and so forth. With regard to the skills of these new, of the new students at Polytechnique, what do you try to teach them? Well, I'd like to come back to what was said about this idea of a consortium and collaboration. This is really at the heart of what we would like to work on developing. We are in a system where there's the initial education that is very focused on the individual. The individual students are evaluated separately, and now we're trying to move towards a way of working that's more collaborative. So students have to understand that they have to work with others, and this is progressively being set up. But this idea, which is quite essential, of working with others, collaborating, is something that we are focusing on more and more, because people need to learn to do this early on. So there's that. And we also work with what we call a project approach or experimental approach. We have a lot of research in this area. In the coursework, we have simulators, we have interdisciplinary centers, where there are simulators that are used in the coursework, but they're also used by research centers so that the different stakeholders can be lined up and we can see how they can work together, even if they may have different outlooks on the world or different ways of working. They might even have objectives that appear to be radically opposed or incompatible. So the idea of putting technical skills and soft skills together within an experimental approach is something that we do in our summer schools and our interdisciplinary centers. We have Energy for Climate Summer School, for example, in partnership with the transition authorities. So this is a way that we can really help the students deal with not only the reasoning behind the transition, but also the emotional or the affective part of the energy transition, which is important for students as well. And we try to help our students to see how organizations could be made more sensitive to the ecological transformation through collaboration, through working with others, through listening, learning how to listen, learning how to ally with different stakeholders, and that's the importance of working with research, but also businesses. We work with businesses that finance academic chairs, for example, and we work with companies that might submit a question or a problem to us, and we work with students so that they can look at how a real-world problem might be addressed. This helps them to see how complex the questions are and how they can apply theory to a real issue. So something that people say is that French schools, the leading French schools, train people for individual excellence, and that cooperation is really a secondary concern in these schools. Would you agree with that? Or do you think there's a new approach? Are people really interested now in doing things in a more cooperative way? Are students motivated by that approach? Yes, I think things are changing gradually. I think I have two children who are in grade school, and I can see how it's already changing at that level as well. There's more and more collective work, and I think this enables people to adopt different positions. A transformation, of course, is something that takes time. But I think people are more prepared to work together. Yes, it starts really in grade school, doesn't it? So what are the obstacles? What are the main obstacles to this type of cooperative work and to the culture of innovation, not only technological but also social, to rise up to challenges, to try things, and to be willing to abandon things when they don't work without having the fear of failure? What are the main obstacles that you encounter today as you go forward? Catherine?
There are many obstacles to innovation. Innovation is very challenging, and this is something that we repeat again and again with the teams. What are the obstacles? Well, there are contextual obstacles, the regulatory instability. When we develop something over time, things take time. We have a lot of assumptions. If regulation changes constantly, well, for example, when we work on an innovation project, regulation is key because it creates the success factors, its profitability over time, and its capacity to be rolled out. It can be an obstacle. It can also be an opportunity. An opportunity, for example, if I think about SRP that has been working for many years on electric vehicle battery recycling, they contributed to make emerge the battery issue, which is a hazardous product in Europe. So they made sure that we have the whole recycling ecosystem in Europe. Otherwise, the economic conditions would be challenging. So regulatory instability is an obstacle, is a challenge. Another challenge, and you talked about it, Pilar, the culture gap. When we work with a startup on the other side of the planet, when our models of values are different, it's difficult to find common ground, difficult to find a shared roadmap. So a challenge is team diversity. It's always a challenge when we set up an innovation project with different geographies. We need to have a great diversity, to have different points of view, but we need to be very well we need to know how we can be successful with players who are different. Are they different because they're a startup or because they have an Anglo-Saxon culture, a different culture? Well, both. Even more if they combine both differences, because they have a different approach to risk, they have different regulation, different financing criteria, they develop projects differently, their vision of an actor such as Veolia is different, whether they're in the US or in France. So there are many factors that we need to take this diversity into account. And as another obstacle, there is social acceptability. We can be convinced of something, but if we do not take social acceptability, we can fail. So we need to understand our market very well, and and the models are going to change. So once again, another obstacle is ourselves, clearly. Our capacity to see risks, to identify what's unknown, and have the willingness to move forward over time by accepting to fail. I believe that all of this is something that we need to work on we need to be able to overcome these obstacles because we need to accelerate on quite a few in quite a few areas. Yeah, we need to accept this mindset. And so regarding this new seminar, what are the obstacles to innovation in a prestigious school such as Polytechnique? I would like to start with what Catherine said, ourselves, our attitude. Our relationship with students. Traditionally, we've worked in an environment where there is a lot of distance between the teacher and the student. And for some approaches, if we want to have more collaboration, we need to be able to change this teacher-student relationship. It is not always easy. Well, you have the attitude of the teacher and the attitude of the student as well. And there is the fear of the unknown. The student is going to be lost a little bit, is going to be disoriented. They're not going to have a guide telling them what they need to do or how. And, well, this is a attitude shift which can be challenging for students. But it is being implemented gradually, it is changing, but it doesn't happen overnight. And then there is dialogue, a dialogue between different subjects. It's not always easy. In a company, it's more natural to collaborate between different departments for a project, but in the academia, people are less used to, working with different departments. So we don't necessarily work with other subjects. And in France, engineering schools are separate from business schools. So it's not always easy to create some sort of harmony between those various areas. And we also need to take into account that innovation depends on social acceptability. And there's red tape as well, the administrative barriers. There are incentives to publications for teachers, for example, students' assessments. So we need to juggle with all these incentives, and we need to think about what processes we need to implement. Well, that's quite a task. BPI. What is the most challenging? What is the main obstacle for you? Main obstacle or small obstacles? What undermines our progress? Well, all of the above. Everything you've mentioned are challenges that we experience in finance as well. We experience the same issues. The main challenge remains time. In terms of energy and ecological transition, the main issue is that time is of the essence. We do not have enough time to act. Not only in terms of regulation, it's just the physical threat is right here. And we are going to look at the 4 pillars of the house before deciding if a finance support is worthy. We're going to first look if there is compliance with regulation. We're going to look at public acceptability. Is the audience ready to accept the type of innovation that is suggested by the SME or the startup? We're also going to look, because we're financiers, so we're going to see if the money is earmarked. So are we funding something that is then going to be funded by other players? And of course, the technological maturity of the innovation, because we are funding, we are active. And we work with researchers. But if we want to come up with clear water solutions, we need a TRL of 7 to 8 before we can have a realistic project. So we have the same structure analysis. As BPI France, there is an ecosystem challenge because in a way we are a market maker. We add a political layer. We are very often the first link of the chain with a French tax subsidy that is given to new companies, but at the same time we need to surround ourselves with a strong ecosystem that is able to invest at different levels of maturity, to finance the construction of a factory. Deep tech, for example, needs new factories. They come from labs, they are startups, they've never been to a factory. And this is a lot of capex. And back to what I said earlier. It's a capacity to integrate the solutions into existing value chains. So that's why the major groups have a key role to play. Apart from a few startups that have a disruptive model where the whole chain is already ready, the rest need to be embedded in the existing chains, and they need to learn to work with with a big group. So this is reflected by what Catherine was saying. You need to learn to work with startups, and the startups need to find their place with a big group that bids in calls for tenders, that have their own compliance committees, they have their own procurement policy, etc., etc. So they play on the international arena. So I believe that the solution will come from a two-way support. If we want a strong economics in France, we need to address the climate challenge. Since you said that 20% of your investments were outside of France, is creating new relationship between startups and major groups and making sure that people are used to working like that. Is it different in other countries where you invest? Are they ahead? Well, we can talk about AI, for example. Those are global issues. And therefore, we need to find global solutions. We need to leverage innovation wherever it is. Obviously, we want innovation to be as European, as French as possible. This is why we are funding this whole ecosystem. But there are very interesting solutions in Asia, in the US, or in the north of Europe, or wherever. This is why BPI France is investing. So we invest in investment funds that are based abroad because we want to encourage them to come invest in France. So we have this dual horizon, and then with our partners we need to have the most holistic vision as possible from a technological standpoint in order to know what is happening everywhere. And is France ahead or behind? Well, I believe that Europe is faring quite well. The EU, with its various mechanisms, the BEI, the FEI, they have opened the way for startups to innovate. The IRA has done the same. I believe that from an investment standpoint, they are less focusing on that. But there are things happening. And in Asia as well, we can see very pragmatic solutions that are being implemented with an industrial expertise that is the most developed in the world. We tend to criticize China and the Southeast Asia, but they have industrial expertise that is extremely advanced. So we need to leverage this expertise. We need to take ownership of it through a partnership or at an individual level. I believe that it is essential, it is mandatory to have an international approach. So what are the main obstacles? What is the most promising innovation in your areas? We will then give the floor to the room. If you had to bet on one innovation, which one would it be? Which innovation can, which is the most promising innovation? Before I answer this question, you talked about the way of doing things. So before talking about the what, I would like to say a few words about the how. Because, you know, Theodora talked about financing innovation, which is key. If we have problems with financing, we won't be able to find our what. We will no longer have on one side startups and on the other us that finance innovation. We won't be able on our CapEx core business be able to finance innovation on our own. So I strongly believe in the tripartite model with very fast players because they are on a specific area of the value chain. Us. Because we're everywhere, we're familiar with all those businesses and financiers that are going to help us find the money. So I believe that this is the best model to go faster wherever we want to go. And so there are a lot of opportunities in the what, much more opportunities than if we were on our own. So regarding the what, I have a lot of topics that are close to my heart. Mentioning one, I believe we need to go very fast on this topic today. It's what I'm calling Veolia's electron. It is organic matter. I believe that Veolia in the circular economy, well, we manage a lot of waste resources, and organic material nowadays is key. We see a lot of players that are making a lot of acquisitions in this area because to generate energy in the future, carbon-free energy in our territories. This is what we're doing. We can go even further, but it is also a source well, it will be the carbon-free fertilizer of the future, organic material, the protein of the future. So organic matter is our own resource at Veolia. We need to fight for that because it opens to a lot of innovations. Well, I talked to Estelle Brachenov, who was coming back from Dubai from COP28, and she met, as you might have seen on the social media, she met the King Charles. I was about to say Prince Charles, no, King Charles, and she said Veolia, and he said, oh, organic matter. Organic fertilizer. So yeah, Veolia equals organic fertilizer for the king. Well, there are people who are going to be very happy in the room here. If you see King Charles, say hi. All right, so one of the solutions is this. You know, it's this tripartite model. There's new way to find alliances. Well, we need to promote all decarbonation projects. This is going to leverage everything, even organic fertilizer. So in my opinion, decarbonation and all the innovation that we put on our innovation roadmap, decarbonation is a key pillar. But I believe that the how is just as important as the what, because otherwise we can spend years and years and years well, I believe that we need to raise funds for innovation, even in large companies, because we need to accelerate, and it is what's going to attract innovative partners. We will be able to be selective, and so I truly believe in this model. This is what we're trying to promote today. Did you see an example of that you could share with us at Veolia or elsewhere? An example of how to work, working with different partners, startups, finances, etc. We've worked a lot with startups, so We had a lot of partnerships. We've failed sometimes because the value was poorly shared, because we had not necessarily looked at what we could provide to the startup. But I'm talking to a very different model, which is quite rare. It's about raising funds together, a startup technology startup, and with us, it is quite different. It is not very widespread today, so we need to continue showing the way. Theodora, what would be the most promising innovation? Well, we can see that we can articulate financial expertise and business expertise. As financiers, obviously, we are not experts in decarbonation. We are not experts in biodiversity. But we are financial experts. So one of our duties is to show that you can be profitable and address climate needs. We cannot lose money with technology, because without money we won't be able to be successful. And so the macro investors are not going to join us, and as we saw earlier, we do need substantial capex. So yes, it is essential to combine everybody's expertise. It reminds me of the main principle of medicine. First, do no harm. And so in the energy and environmental transition today, we see too many projects that address one part of the problem, carbon capture, for example, but doing that, they are going to disrupt the water cycle, they are going to contaminate soil and destroy biodiversity. So it's important to have a more and more holistic approach, because the planet is a unique ecosystem where different areas communicate. We do not know to what extent and how. So we need to have those nature-based solutions. First, do no harm in our technology with our technological choices. As for the models, there are more and more decentralized models. I don't know if you looked at the regulation on dishwashers in restaurants, fast food restaurants. It is forbidden to have cardboard containers. So you might have seen that there are new containers that are reusable. So this was a solution that was funded by decentralized funding. So you didn't have conventional bankers. It's any individual who contributed. There was crowdfunding or Web3. There are different models to do that. So 3 takeaway messages. Combine financial and business expertise. Do no harm. A transition issue has consequences and actions and consequences. And think about all forms of funding, centralized, decentralized. Pilar, what is the most promising innovation? I'd like to talk about the articulation of different expertise. It's essential to move forward. Let me use an example of a project that is being developed with the academia, university partners, but not only. We are working on water decentralization and circularity. A lot of stakeholders need to work together. First, the cities in which we want to carry out the experiment. We need to have the technical expertise to implement everything that has to do with technology. So we work with startups that have technologies with a TRL that is ready for the market. We also need to think about the governance model, the business model, so that everything can be implemented. We need more interdisciplinarity. So, as a teacher, as a professor, I need to think about how I can work with colleagues from other subjects. How can I work with colleagues from other horizons, other backgrounds, NGOs? We work with NGOs for this type of project. The objective is to combine these different expertise and think or build solutions that enable us to have a systemic vision. This is what Theodora said. We need to have a global vision of the positive and negative impacts. Thank you very much, ladies. A lot of information. So yeah, interdisciplinarity, holistic technology, which is key for the solutions of the future. But not only, you've also talked a lot about the need to find new ways to cooperate, having a new mindset, finding alliances. It's a key success factor for innovation, just as it's more important than the individual solutions in order to scale up. So thank you very much for your presentations. Thank you for your answers. And we now have time for some questions. Thank you. You have the floor. We have 3 experts who approach different topics. I'm sure you're very interested. Do not hesitate. And Patrick Legrand, what a surprise, has a question. But I'm sure that there are other people as well. Let's start with Patrick. Go ahead, ask your questions. Good morning. So it's great to talk about articulating those various innovations. And we're trying to change the system. And there's a social, technical aspect of all the objects. But this is coming late. An object is structurally socio-technical. It is not social-technical, then social. When you technique social acceptability, it's a bad idea. There's one aspect of innovation that I would like to insist on. We never really know what it's going to be used for. It can have a lot of different uses, and they can be integrated without being perceived. Let me give you an example. Oh, and you're going to ask a question, maybe, Patrick? Yes. I live in Belleville. I'm aware of poverty. I see poverty increasing, and yesterday, one of my homeless friends told me, what are you doing tomorrow? So I said that I was coming to this conference, and he said, I don't know if they know, but we get less and less cash because there's less and less cash, and people now pay with their credit card and they don't have change, they don't have cash. And I thought, well, that's quite something. Cash is disappearing. And it leads to chaos and increased poverty. We're close to a disaster. A young person who would want to give some change to my homeless friends can't anymore. They don't have change anymore. And so the homeless becomes aggressive because they were used to receiving some change. So there was this nice system And I believe that it was a way to regulate a few things. What I mean by all that is that innovation is not a straight line. It always has some uses, and sometimes we can't imagine the uses of an innovation. So there's innovation in short term and long term, and innovation can lead to disasters, because I can tell you that in Belleville, aggressiveness between the, the average citizen and the homeless person is quite something. And so, what is your question? Well, how do we manage all of this? Why are you laughing? I can send you my homeless friends if you're not nice to me. Ethics. We didn't talk about ethics. Because people are deciding your future and they don't necessarily have the same ethics as you. This is key in innovation. Are you done, Patrick? Yes. So, unexpected outcome of an innovation. That's interesting. How did people think about that? The fact that people would not have cash for homeless people when they came up with the cashless system. So, in the screening of your investments, in the choice of startups, do you take into account the expected and unexpected consequences? So how do you do that? How do you try and take that into account? And how do you take into account ethics?
Well, I don't know if I can actually answer Patrick's question, but it's true that the unknown and the uncertainties of innovation and what its impact will be, that's obviously something that is very difficult to include in our models or to anticipate even. We have to be very demanding with regard to our criteria when evaluating innovation. Is we have to think about impact on the environment in particular, because it's a whole ecosystem, but also on the social environment, the capacity of the collective public to finance the innovation, so the affordability of innovation. And it's true there's some technological innovation, in particular when we're looking at pollution and depollution. We have to ensure that we're really choosing the best solution, because we might end up using one resource to depollute another, and it might have an impact on the price of water, for example. So we have to be able to evaluate all of these consequences when we're considering an innovation, and also the capacity of the population in different areas to accept, for example, an increase in the price of water because we have added depollution processes. So it's true that this question of ethics is something that does come in. We have to look at the impact of our innovations on ecosystems, but also on the social systems. Yes, from a financial point of view, we talk about corporate and social responsibility. We talk about ESG, but it's true that businesses do have to take account of this over time. They have to look at, there's a social responsibility and environmental responsibility, both. And these new families of technologies may have consequences for people who might lose their jobs, for example, because what they're doing is no longer considered to be appropriate in this time of environmental transformation. So it's important to work with companies so that they can become as green as possible. There's a question of employability of people, so we have to work on training programs. We have to work with research centers so that people can learn how to use new technologies. And our answer is the creation of businesses that will create jobs. That's how we address the social aspect. We have seen that as more jobs are created and more training programs are on offer, I think we will find solutions to these problems of the impact of innovation. We ask our teams to line up their financial bonuses with the reality of the environmental criteria and social criteria that they have committed to, so that we can see that there is a link between the financial stakes and the environmental and social stakes for any given business. Yes, I think that these training and education, indeed, that's very important when we look at this question of a trade-offs that might be created. We don't always think about what is the trade-off when we have a new innovation. When we're talking about corporate responsibility, of course, it has to do with economic responsibility towards stakeholders and also responsibility towards society as a whole. For innovation, one thing we need to work on harder is this question of the trade-off dilemma, so that very early on in projects, when we're working with students, for example, we try to encourage students to think about what questions of this nature might arise so that they can have an integrated, a systemic approach. And we try to keep our students aware of the fact that perhaps they didn't take account of this or that stakeholder or this or that impact. This is something that we try to include in our students' coursework. Everything that we're saying here is really how do we look globally at impacts and stakeholders. So it's not only financial performance, but it's a very global assessment. And at Veolia, we've been doing this for some years now. Of course, I just wondered because, for example, the question of the price of water, questions of affordability, it can't go beyond a certain threshold. We know how to do that. We're able to work with local authorities on these questions of water affordability. I'm thinking about the inclusion of sociologists, psychologists, people who are working in the field, as we define policies and try to go a bit farther. Often it's something that comes after the fact because we have a business model. I'm thinking of Bangladesh, when the Grameen Bank, the business model didn't really work out. And so it had been planned to be affordable. It's true it wasn't expensive, and yet people were not buying it. Because after the fact, an anthropologist came in and discovered that they had forgotten to calculate the fact that the well was part of a social status, and suggesting that there might be arsenic in the well water was really having a negative impact on people's social status, and it was not acceptable. So we have to have a systematic approach so that upstream you can always try to anticipate this type of problem. We have to include other disciplines, not only economic analysis, but social, psychological, social sciences. I think Theodora's example earlier was a good one. This is a subject that is something that we have to take on board very early by including many stakeholders of Veolia in Spain and Alicante, set up a solution with several objectives, and very far upstream we integrated economic actors, the people living nearby. So typically we try to take all of these topics on board, but it's true that we need to be very systematic in this approach, and we have to be sure that we take these topics on board as soon as possible, as early as possible in our projects. Do we have another question from the room? Jean-Pierre. Thank you. A word I didn't hear much this morning was artificial intelligence. Do you think that it doesn't have much to do with innovation? Do you think that AI could even be an obstacle to innovation? Do you think that maybe this is a bit of a provocation, but do you think that AI is something that could actually be something that slows down innovation by its very nature, because of its structure? It's true that we've seen ChatGPT and what it can do. I think you've probably all tried it out. You're all probably working to some extent with the Internet of Things. You're looking at generative AI. And I think that it is a technology that has been adopted very quickly when compared to other technologies. But it does raise a lot of questions for all of us. It's called artificial intelligence, but it's based on human intelligence. We mustn't forget that. A lot of researchers and businesses are working on AI, and perhaps one day AI will be thinking for itself and will be, surpassing human intelligence. But there are advantages and drawbacks, certainly, and I think AI does provide some good solutions for the ecological transition, among other things. But don't forget about its energy consumption, because the capacity to calculate requires a lot of computers, a lot of servers, so it uses a lot of energy. Nonetheless, there are some interesting applications. For example, controlling energy consumption in a building by taking account of the temperature outside, the number of people inside. There are ways that you can maximize your energy consumption using AI. Ways of calculating when is the time when you need more hot water, for example. So there are ways of managing energy use in a building, and you can actually generate formulas. And I think sometimes people, for example, or if you're looking at chemical combinations for new medicines, humans might take years and years to test out all the different variations, whereas AI could test it out very quickly. So there are advantages. But if it is correctly used, I think AI can bring advantages. It's true we didn't talk about that much today, because I think at Veolia there are a lot of subjects that perhaps are related to issues of disruptive technology. I think there's a lot of progress to be made in terms of our operational performance, and we're always adding new functions, modeling, planning, programming, scheduling, and it's all going forward very quickly. And at Veolia, we have a whole team working on use cases from our historic or our traditional fields of work. And we're trying to always increase our energy efficiency through the study of use cases and deployment of solutions. We work on subjects where we have a physical reality behind the subject. It's not just theory. We have operational services. And perhaps AI is a bit theoretical still at this point. Of course, all of our work can be impacted by AI. It could bring added value, but it could also bring risk along with it. I think AI could help us in some areas, but we need to assess it carefully. So maybe the next conference from the Institute will have to do with AI and innovation. Why not? That could be a topic. It's funny because I've just come back from Royaumont, where we had a discussion and decided that next year's topic would be how can we live with innovation and AI. And we had a consultant from BCG who said, we don't know exactly how, but I'm convinced, he said, that artificial intelligence, which is frightening to many people, is something that will be used for operational advances, but it will especially be used by people working in innovation, because in innovation, people will understand that some things are going to disappear, but that's not really their problem. Innovators from all fields are interested in what fosters the culture of innovation. And so these are the people who will be focused on AI. So the more you're interested in innovation, the more you understand the interest of working with AI. That was his hypothesis, that there was a very direct link between innovation and artificial intelligence. Well, then there's the question of governance as well. And I think that's where we are not quite ready, because how do you set up your governance around open AI? I think that's where our capacity for innovation and governance is something that hasn't quite caught up to all of the factors of AI, or all of the doors that AI might open. Yes, I think that the question of AI is something that everyone is thinking about in research centers. In our interdisciplinary center in particular, we are looking into AI. But there is a link, as Theodora was saying, there's a link between the impact on the environment. We have done research at the Technology for Change chair, and we've looked at the link between the environmental or the ecological transformation and AI. So we've just invented a new conference, and we'll have you come back and address that. That would be interesting. Some more questions? Emmanuel Augustin. Thank you, Dina, for your innovation. Thank you for your article, Emmanuel. I'd like to talk about the human factor in the ecological transformation. When we innovate for the ecological transformation, we are innovating with what objective? Is it to reduce emissions? Is it to solve climate change? We might as well dream, I guess. Or are we innovating to develop a new economy, a regenerative economy that will require a radical change and perhaps giving up some things that we have gotten used to? And when we think about the future, is thinking about the future what leads your innovative process? Good question. That's a very good question. It's a question of temporality, isn't it? It has to do with the financing as well. This is one of the difficulties of the energy and ecological transformation, because there is no perfect answer. From a technological point of view, we do have solutions, but they're often only partial solutions to part of the problem, and it's difficult to find more holistic solutions. I think that we have to accept that we need to break down problems into priority segments and address them perhaps piece by piece, starting with the highest priority, and then thinking about the consequences as we go along. Aviation, in particular, is a sector where we have regulations targeting 2030, where there should be no more kerosene fuel. From a technological point of view, we are not ready. There's a lot of investment in hydrogen. There are consortiums. There are funds. We can see that major groups with very specific know-how have come together with financial operators, but we don't have an answer today that will enable us to fly from Paris to San Francisco in a hydrogen-fueled plane. There are electric airplanes. They're advancing, but we know that these planes can only fly short distances for a limited time, but that is a solution. There are biofuels, and we know that this will be in conflict with food resources, so that's not a long-term solution either. Then there are carbon capture solutions. Here we have a whole chain that needs to be developed. We know how to capture carbon. We sort of know how to store it and transport it, but this is another response to reusing fuel. I mean, there are lots of parts and pieces in that sector. There are short-term, medium-term, and long-term responses. And I think in these technologies, that's what we have to do, is break it down. So we will need to continue to use transportation, but we have to use it in a more environmentally friendly way. Yes, I think that we will. People are talking about no growth or slow growth. I think that it's quite optimistic. That's my point of view. Maybe people won't be able to live the same, the same way that we always live, the same way that we live now, but people will still want to continue to take airplanes, whether it's for business or for tourism. We will need to continue to use airplanes, and so we have to work on short-term, medium-term, and long-term technological solutions. And those three types of solutions are, at this point, quite different. Look at batteries, just for one example. We need to invest in different types of batteries because we don't know which battery will be the best in the long term. So we're do what we call spread and pray. What is the vision that guides Veolia for innovation? What is our vision? I think the vision of our general manager is that the ecological transformation is something that is desirable and that we need social acceptance through solutions that are not only technological. I think this vision translates the Veolia's mindset, which is concrete, which is something based in real-time work. The desirability of social acceptance is something that we rely upon because otherwise we won't be able to push forward with innovation. We won't be able to help companies. We won't be able to provide the best solutions. So the important aspect, I think, of our future vision is the desirability of acceptance. The ecological transformation must involve many different factors. There will be changes that are radical. There will be disruptions. It's true that today there's a lot of inequality, and I think this is something that we have to confront. It leads us to many contradictory positions at times. We have to think about social acceptance of different ecosystem protection. Otherwise, we won't be able to move forward together. I think that the nature of our organization is such that there is a central role for technology. But that doesn't mean that other visions cannot be present as well, or other ways of thinking. There are students who are strongly focused. I don't know if they're going to go so far as to the idea of the regenerative economy, but they are focused on the role of consumption in our society. That's what's part of the wealth of our educational institutions, is that you can have many visions. You're not restricted to in your thoughts. You can think about many different solutions, the challenges, the advantages and drawbacks of different visions or approaches. And that's what will enable us to move forward towards this necessary transition. People need to listen to one another and have a fruitful dialogue. We have a question here from François Zinc. Yes, thank you. My question concerns the operational path forward for innovation. Listening to you, I felt like we didn't really have much of a compass in order to determine which models we would be using. We've seen that economic models talk about risk exposure, in particular climate risk. But what about the compass to determine impact, or to guide us away from negative impact, in particular with regard to improving our decarbonization efforts? So when decisions are made for awarding contracts, for example, given that you've talked about the uncertainty principle, what is our compass finally? Do we have to focus on decarbonization? Do we have to look at environmental accountancy? What should be our guidelines? What are the recommendations? What are the methodologies that we have at our disposal when we have to make investment decisions? I think there's a time for developing innovation, developing innovative solutions, looking at their profitability, seeing what they can deliver. And I think when we have this plural evaluation of performance, that is something that will give us precise criteria with regard to the energy impact, the carbon footprint, but not only those aspects. These are very broad topics, and I think the criteria may differ from time to time, but we will always try to reconcile our different pillars in the context of our plural performance program. We have this idea of calls for tender, where we may have a slightly different approach each time, even though the plural performance will remain our main criteria. It depends then afterwards on the area, the economic model, the partners we're working with. And we do have a compass. We do have some key points, which are decarbonization, sustainability, different regions that we have given priority to. And these are criteria that we look at systematically. And we then also have case-by-case concerns as well, because we have 45 different countries where we work. They all have different regulatory environments. So obviously we can't always have the same solution, but we have tried to stick to our main targets, and decarbonization is one of the very main preoccupations that we have. I think we have 1 minute left. Maybe one more question. I can see that people have been getting up to go to lunch, I think so. Grégoire Decamp from Veolia. A question for Theodora with regard to the criteria, more specifically in financing. How do you distinguish between solutions based on nature, which are not always the most profitable, not the most exciting on the short term, but which may be more resilient. How do you choose between these gray solutions and green solutions? How can you be sure that you are really having a good mix? Because, of course, profitability is important. So how do you ensure a good mix of green and profitable? Do you have tools that you use? All of this is quite new for the financial sphere. So, of course, regulations, of course, are something that we all have to adhere to. With regard to innovation, it takes many forms, and it is often in its early stages. When we look at the France 2030 agenda, we already have criteria that have been established. And I think France is well ahead of the pack in that regard. It is the ADEM, the Ministry of the Environmental Transition. BPI also has experts working on this. And there are other experts and researchers who are associated with the definition of and the criteria to be used for this agenda. And this is in particular true for water, green chemistry. All of these criteria are public. They're based on a point system, and this is part of the France 2030 agenda. Now, of course, we have to focus more on nature-based solutions. This is a fairly new idea in France. This morning I was talking about a microalgae and so forth that could capture carbon and transform it into plastic alternatives. These solutions are deep tech solutions that come out of laboratories, and so we have the whole scientific aspect that has to be validated. So it's not only the financial partner who's going to, it's not the financial partner who's going to do the full analysis, because we have to work with experts that know about the technological aspects. And very often, these solutions have already been thoroughly studied by the time they come forward for financing. Thank you all very much. I'd like to thank our participants. We can give them another round of applause. Thank you for this broad look at innovation. And I'd like to thank everyone who will be reading the last issue. It's just been published today on innovation. I think you can find it in the back of at the back of the room. And you can also see it on site. Please don't hesitate. There's some very interesting articles from people here in the room, as well as others. And we welcome your feedback with regard to any subjects that you would like to see addressed in future meetings as well. Thank you all very much. Have a good day.